French Ambassador Mr. Diégo Colas, welcome to the interview. Days ago, President Macron said, Russia must not be humiliated despite Putin's historic mistake. Don't you consider this announcement humiliative for Georgians and Ukrainians?
I don't think so, because I think this statement has to be seen in the context of a policy of very strong support for Ukraine. The policy of France since the beginning of this unjustified and unspeakable aggression of Russia against Ukraine has been one of very massive support in terms of military equipment, support in terms of sanctions. France, as the presidency of the EU, was instrumental in finding agreement on the 6 packages of sanctions that were taken, that went much beyond any previous packages of sanctions that we have done before. France was also instrumental in helping Ukraine make the legal case for the various crimes that were created and that will have to stand in courts of law. We have forensics experts now deployed in Ukraine, helping Ukraine making those cases and helping the Ukrainian prosecutor service do their work.
How about Georgia, which also should be named among humiliated by Russia?
There was a war in 2008. It was absolutely a horrendous and horrible moment for Georgians. We are aware of that. We did try, as you mentioned, to bring peace after the conflict and to find some sort of a political settlement. It was an effort to help Georgia recover as much territory as possible and as much peace as possible in order to maintain on its pro-Western route. That was the objective. That was largely achieved. I am aware that there's frustrations since 2008 by Russia's not fulfilling the 6-point agreement and all the challenges that this is creating. This is an issue on which we have been completely supportive of Georgia, clearly. On the policy towards Ukraine and the statements of Macron, again, the policy is to support Ukraine very strongly, to be careful about maximalist rhetoric, but to support Ukraine very strongly. And that I find no reason to see grounds for humiliation of Georgia or of anybody else.
Last year, President Macron granted Mr. Ivanishvili with French Order of the Legion of Honor. Isn't that awkward to see EU Parliament calling for sanctions to be considered on Ivanishvili?
The award that you are referring to was given because of the very strong support that the Cartu Foundation had given in Georgia, in particular to the French school that exists in Georgia, and more broadly to the Franco-Georgian University, which are very important progress, which have been very much helped by this foundation. And that's the reason for this award. A policy of sanctions towards the leadership of people that are thought to be the leadership of Georgia is a very different policy from the one that we are having now. Our policy right now is a policy of strong support for Georgia. It's a policy that has translated into visa-free circulation, into a degree of ambition in the association agreement, which is that what few countries have. We don't see any reason to move away from that policy of very strong support for Georgia. On the point of freedom of the press, you are right to highlight that there are significant concerns about the state of freedom of the press, and they have been expressed publicly by me and as well as by the European Union. There are several ways to address those concerns, changing entirely the relation from one of support to Georgia towards a relation of much more confrontational. I'm not sure would necessarily be the most effective to guarantee and strengthen freedom of the press in Georgia.
It's clear that many things will have to be done if EU grants us with candidacy status. But what should Georgian government do if EU rejects our request?
It's hard to know exactly what will be the decision, and I'm a little bit prudent before speculating as to what the European Council decides, what the member states decide in European Council. The accession process itself is a very long process of meeting standards and meeting conditions, so it's a long race. And my invitation would be for everyone to realize that this is a long haul. I understand that this is very spectacular now because there might be for the first time a recognition of some sort of a European perspective. So far, Georgia has been saying we have European aspirations, but the EU has never said we agree with that this is a shared perspective. And that makes the whole moment very unique, very spectacular. But we need to be aware that this is a long process, that if we are a little bit disappointed by where we are at this stage, it doesn't matter very much given the length of the race. If on the other side, we think we are very happy by the results that we get, we need to realize that this is still a long a long race, and therefore that we shouldn't breed complacency. So for that reason, I would invite to keep a sense of the perspective of this whole process.
As in any of European countries, EU is willing to see the pride parades to be held in Georgia. In the meantime, Russia is trying, sometimes successfully, to make people think that the EU is all about pride parades. What do you think the EU must do to make Russian hybrid war lost?
This is a very wide question and a very good one, because the questions that exist in Georgia, they exist in other member states, they exist in France, they exist everywhere. One of the reasons of the strong reactions of July 5th was because we saw that some very fundamental principles were at stake. The freedom of assembly, the protection of minorities against majority, freedom of the press was also very much into question on that day. In the case of Georgia, it seems to me that this broad question about the March of Dignity of last year and of various events organized by the LGBT community in Georgia in the past 2 or 3 years raises questions which are very important for that country. Those questions are the rights of the individual and the duties of everybody towards the collective. What is the balance between the two? The importance of tradition and the importance of modernity in the path of development. How do we balance those things? Those are challenges which exist everywhere. Georgia wants to be a European country, very strongly feels like a European country. When I studied Georgian history since I've arrived, it struck me how for centuries, millennia, Georgia was keen to be part of the European civilization. This is really one of the great wealths of this country. When you visit Tbilisi, Kutaisi, so many other places, people proudly show this. So there is very much in the Georgian ethos, in the Georgian reality, the possibility to find this place for everyone. And I think this is one of the challenges coexistence in the 21st century. And I don't speak as the man who knows to the Georgians who don't know, because in France we also have this challenge of finding this way of accommodating all of our diversity. This is very much a challenge of Europeans. Unity in diversity is very much a European challenge, and this is part of the European experience.
Some leading Georgian opposition parties consider Georgian government as illegal and refuse working with them, even though the EU has no questions about their legitimacy. What should the ambassador of France advise them to do?
Generally, I give the same advice to everyone in Georgia. I admire, I find exciting in Georgia the way most people in Georgia are attracted to the European civilization, the European experience. And this is something I really encourage everybody to find. The strength of contacts between Georgians and Europeans of all sorts. So it could be parliamentarians, but for lawyers, contacts with lawyers, for artists, contact with artists, was very strong. There were a lot of ties. Those have, by the force of the pandemics, been interrupted because of COVID. And I really encourage people to re-find the way for these to revive those contacts, because I think that this was very important in the general balance of life in Georgia. This would be the sort of thing that will help everybody take the right distance from the issues and find constructive ways forward, which is very important.
French Ambassador Mr. Diégo Colas was our guest. Thank you for this interesting interview.
Thank you very much.